Welcome, everybody. As you know, I'm Joe Askren, USF School of Hospitality, and we're in for a real treat today. We have two incredible brewers locally here on the west coast of Florida, and we're going to be talking about different beer styles from around the world. So, as you know, we've been traveling around globe-trotting, as I call it, to different countries, and we've covered just all kinds of different regions in many countries all over the world. We're going to probably hit on 8 or 9 different countries in this session, but I think it's really important to try these styles, get some incredible input from these experts. And I have Josh Wilson. Josh is the owner, head brewer at Big Top Brewing in Bradenton. We have Jason Thompson, head brewer, owner of Calusa in Sarasota, and we're happy to have these gentlemen. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
So we're starting off with two lagers. We have the Boston Lager. It's noted as a smooth German style lager. It's the recrafted recipe, so I know they are very interested to try this. Obviously, you can see the difference in colors, and we're going to sort of have them discuss the difference between lagers and ales and what these are, what makes up these possibly. But this is a pretty famous, very popular lager in the U.S., and it's we have Boston Beer Company who actually produces this beer, and it's owned by SA, who also owns Dogfish Head Brewery. Because as we're going through country to country, what I always try to sort of describe and make a note of are the owners and the difference between craft brewing, the microbreweries, and how those differ from the macro breweries, the big conglomerate guys. So, gentlemen, let's maybe taste the Boston Lager and see what you guys think about it.
Definitely.
So we have lagers and ales. Ales are known as the oldest. Those go back thousands of years. I mean, I've traced it back to 11,700 BC, and lagers came in much later after that due to there's just different yeast strands, cooling temperatures, fermentation temperatures. How would you describe the difference between lagers and ales?
I think just the most basic fundamental difference between the two is the way that they ferment. Where ales are top fermenting, meaning they would float and ferment on top of the beer, typically at warmer temperatures, and lager yeast typically ferment at the bottom of a beer and under cooler temperatures. And typically what that means is that ales will have more fermentation character, whether it's esters or phenolics. They're usually a little more fruity, and lagers are typically more clean. Fermenting at cooler temperatures suppresses esters and phenolics, so you get more of the malt and yeast that's used in the beer, and malt and hops in the beer, and less of the yeast character.
Well said. Excellent. Yeah, and man, this first one, this Boston Lager, what do you guys think of it before I give my comment? It's interesting, isn't it?
You know what? I get a lot of maltiness right off the top.
Yeah.
Very, very malty in the nose, in the body. I'm actually surprised they used any adjuncts in this, but it looks like they've used quite a few.
And it's interesting, it looks maybe a little lighter in color than the old recipe.
Does it?
The old recipe was like borderline like reddish brown, whereas this is a little more like copper and golden.
It's definitely copper.
You guys have great memories. Wow. I guess as we're traveling through these countries and looking at all the different beer styles from country to country, there's a trend. There's a common thread that we've been sort of finding. I've been finding. They've been listening to. Is that these different countries when they start to brew, whether it's thousands of years ago up until current day, is they always start out with the ales, and then these lagers sort of take over. Once the German Czech style lagers get there and get into that culture, into that country, not all of them, but I'd say about 90% of the countries we look at, the lagers sort of just take off. Why do I prefer ales myself, but why do you think lagers have become so popular?
I honestly think it's because of the easy drinking. They finish very clean. The one thing that, as a brewer, you look at, one of the two things you do when you go into a brewery is you want to try the lager because you can't hide anything. It's going to be a clean presence of what it is, and show the character of the beer for what it is.
I think to kind of rewind on that too, a reason why there was such a proliferation of lagers in Europe was in large part due to just manufacturing and malting processing, and then also having the ability to control fermentation temperature. Ales were popular because you didn't need fermentation control. You didn't need a refrigerator or a glycol chiller or fermenters.
True.
But then on top of that, as malt manufacturing processes got better, malts became lighter and lighter. Originally, malts were probably smoked. They were probably kind of brown and kind of smoky, and over time they got cleaner and cleaner. So combining that with the fact that fermentation got cleaner and cleaner as well led to beers that have a really high level of drinkability.
Right.
And I think just philosophically for me, like the big difference between spirits and wine is that beer is about drinkability. It's about being able to have, a large volume without becoming, overly intoxicated.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I tell you, a lot of the beer that I like to say a lot of time is the emotional connection. You can drink a beer with other people and you can drink it alone, you're still going to get the same experience. And sometimes when you drink wine, you drink with people, it all tastes good, but you drink that same wine alone and it doesn't always taste the same. But with beer, it's not that way. There's an emotional connection with that.
That's interesting. You bring up a good point, Jason, as far as the advancement in technology, ability to ferment at cooler temperatures. And of course, we have some of the early countries doing lagers for the first time. They're in the colder sort of latitudes, but that actually matches my brewing experience with these courses at USF. Is that we didn't have a whole lot of equipment, and I've still to this day haven't made a lager yet, although now we do have the technology. We have the glycol system, but it was very easy to brew the ales because we were literally fermenting them or physically fermenting them at room temperature, and it was just the air conditioned temperature. So that's interesting. And maybe it's just I think you both hit on it. The approachability, it's more crushable. I think is the word. Crushable is a word that you've kind of heard tossed back and forth a lot in the past, but maybe it's more approachable to more people, to the masses maybe.
That's true.
I don't know. So we can move on, but let's obviously we haven't even talked about the Pilsner Urquell, which is incredible. So this is the OG, the Pilsner Urquell. It's a lighter colored glass, and we can go back to the Boston Lager, but the Pilsner Urquell, it's the OG of Pilsner, comes from Pilsen, which used to be Czechoslovakia, now it's Czech Republic. In 1842 is when it was first made. So and it uses the Saz hops, which is unique to Czechoslovakia. And I would like to get your input on this too, because you guys are well more versed in this than I am. But I know that Czechoslovakia is just an incredible climate to grow barley and hops. And there is some debate. Certainly, if you're in Czechoslovakia, they might argue that lagers, even lagers, came from Czechoslovakia. Of course, Germans might argue with that too, and they have their case too. But it's interesting. But the hops in Czechoslovakia are certainly prized and always requested with different recipes, certainly lagers. So maybe we can just sort of touch real quickly on the Pilsner Urquell and then maybe sort of compare and contrast. The color's obviously lighter. Do you notice? I agree. The maltiness and the Boston Lager is there. How does it compare to the Pilsner Urquell?
The Pilsner is actually got this really nice balanced sweetness with the hops. You still get a little bit of bitterness in there. You can taste it, but it's very balanced with the sweetness without the malty character.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
Pilsner Urquell is definitely like the textbook of Czech pills, and typically Czech pills are pretty rich and bready, but also supported by a relatively large volume of both flavor and aroma hops, as well as like bitterness. Right. And I mean, this is a great example of that. It's rich and malty, but also supported by a pretty firm bitterness and hop aroma. It's interesting too to compare to the Sam Adams, because I think the original recipe of Sam Adams was meant to be more of like a Vienna lager, whereas now I don't know if I would quite call it that. It's definitely more malty than I remember it being.
Right. Yeah. How would you define a Vienna lager, real quick?
Vienna lager is like an amber lager that's got a medium level of bitterness and a low to medium level of like noble hop character. Whereas this drink's much more malty than I remember it being, and less bitter as well.
Definitely less bitter. Yeah. Thank you.
And I don't really want to compare the two because they're not necessarily like the same beer style.
True.
So I'd be interested as to what Sam Adams was going for with this new remastered edition. It's still good though. But
Yeah, I like it. Every time I sort of listen to people talk about the Pilsner Urquell, it's actually the first beer I have students try. In day one, we tried Pilsner Urquell right off the bat. I'm a big fan of it, and it's funny. I was never really a big lager fan drinker, but I do like the Pilsner Urquell, and I love the Pilsners that you guys have made in the past. Incredible Florida flavor is one of my favorites, and are you guys making a Pilsner or lager these days?
We do the wellies.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, no, but when I'm looking at this description, and as I was saying, talking to brewers and people, they always use the word crispy or something. Crispy finish on the Pilsner Urquell. Is that true, or is that just sort of
I'd say
copy?
if saying it's crispy, it's because of the carbonation. You're making it a little bit brighter. It's finishing a little bit cleaner.
yeah, I think that's just kind of a little slogan for
Yeah.
lagers in general. Typically, they're drier and higher carbonation, so they come across a little more lively.
Fantastic. Anything else you want to say about these first two beers, gentlemen?
I enjoyed them both.
Fantastic. Excellent. All right. All right. So our next one is just a showstopper. We all love this one. It's the Saison du Pont. It is a Saison from Belgium, from West Wallonia, sort of northwest Wallonia, which is the southern part of the country. It's just an incredible beer. It's a traditional farmhouse ale. It's unfiltered. It uses it's very hot, very use forward, as they say, very use forward, and has kind of colors of lemon and pear and clove, and it's always an experience because there is some differences from batch to batch, I guess, right, on this one. Before we try this one, any comments on farmhouse ale or Saison or beers of this style?
I guess one of the best ways to describe them would be very rustic.
Yeah.
And farmhouse ales were typically beers brewed on farms for workers to drink in the summer months. They usually have like Pilsner malt and some wheat, and maybe some like Belgian candy sugar. But they're very, very dry, typically like medium to high ABV, and have a lot of like fruity esters and phenolics. So they're kind of like peach and green apple and black pepper. They're really fun to drink. They're great beers.
And by the way, folks, this is the lighter colored one we're talking about. And again, Saison du Pont. And what is bottle finish? What does that mean? Because this beer, this style is actually bottle finished. What does that mean?
Well, start out with the fermentation through the regular process of the tank, and then it's finished in the bottle. So it goes through almost a secondary fermentation in the bottle to give it carbonation.
Nice. That's tricky to do, right? I mean, it's from a home brewing perspective.
Oh yeah,
it seems
definitely.
pretty tricky.
But I'm sure a lot of homebrewers have done it accidentally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the most common way that homebrewers would carbonate their beer is to undergo bottle conditioning.
Excellent. Gentlemen, you want to try it?
Sure.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Wow.
There may be some like batch to batch differences, but one thing of note is depending on the bottle that Saison du Pont comes in will have an impact too on its character. Like this is a brown bottle. Probably the most traditional was the green bottle.
Okay.
And the green bottle will let just a tiny little bit of UV light through, which has an impact on the character of the beer. It kind of adds a little bit of like a skunkiness, but not to the point of like being off-putting. And a brown bottle is going to filter out that UV, so you won't get that same character. And then if it comes in a can, which they're can conditioning now as well, we'll drink much more like a brown bottle. So the original Saison du Pont was always in green bottles, so it's much even more rustic in a green bottle. In a way.
Absolutely. Interesting. I didn't know that. Great information there. Yeah, and it says it's often described as, and I have my notes here, it's thirst quencher, and so traditionally we've talked about this in one of the lectures. It's a farmhouse ale, so traditionally they were made in the wintertime for the springtime for farmers, specifically made for farmers. Low ABV. This one comes in at 4.2% ABV. They were probably even lower, they say, in the 3% traditionally, but I love this one. This is great.
Yeah, no, it's good. The thing that I know you said in your notes, the peach, and I have to say that the peach came right off the nose right away to me, and I don't know if it was just because you mentioned it first, but it stuck with me, the peach.
That is interesting. Psychologically, that happens to me a lot, where I don't taste a certain spice or smell, and then until somebody says it, and then it's whoa, it's right there, just because I heard the word.
Oh, the
That's
breadiness is
interesting.
amazing. I mean, it's you know, you feel like you're drinking a heavy body beer, but it's not. It's very light.
Yeah.
It's refreshing.
Right. Any other comments on this wonderful beer from Belgium? We have another Belgian beer coming up down the road here, so look forward to that one. So the next one we have here is the Smithwick's Red Ale. It's a famous red ale. It's made in Kilkenny, Ireland. It's made since 1710. This is an old one. It's kind of described as a non-roasty, malty ale, but also light and refreshing. The ABV isn't too bad. The ABV is actually 4.5, and I've only made one red ale with the students in our lab, and it took some research because we really wanted to sort of nail the color of it. Is that difficult to do, or is it tricky making a red ale in your opinion, gentlemen?
You know, it's not that it's tricky. It's just it's kind of cool because, like was mentioned before, is talked about the malting process of the grains and the different colors and how that in the beginning they were probably a little bit darker, and that's kind of like how brewers paint colors of beer like a painter would. Is the palette is going to be the grain, and by using the different color grains, you can kind of create this palette of the color of the beer. And with a lot of them, you can use like the chocolate malts blended with the base malt, and you can kind of balance that color to where you want it to be.
Is there a choice over what you prefer as far as using a roasted barley or a crystal malt? Is that
It's going to be what your end game is. So, like, as a brewer, you know, you're gonna. I always like to say, you know, anybody can paint or draw a picture of an elephant, and you can take that elephant, you can paint it any color you want, and it's still going to be an elephant. So, in other words, if you as a brewer, want that characteristic to come out, then you're going to be the one to make that decision based on the grains you're using. So I think it's just preference. You know, you might like it maltier, so maybe you're going to use more crystal malt. You might like it roastier, so maybe you're going to use more of the darker roasted malts. It all depends on what you want and what you want to finish.
absolutely? It's interesting tasting this one right after the Saison DuPont. Comments on the flavor, Jason?
I'm just going to comment on kind of like the style. An Irish red, like if I were to approach brewing one, I try to work backwards, kind of like reverse engineer. And like the classic example would be Smithwick's, and typically Irish reds are usually like more caramel and toffee forward, and aren't really relying on like roasted malt flavor to develop that color. But depending on what your end goal is, like you could make it a little more, maybe a tiny little bit more roasty, so it has like borderline like some espresso or like like chocolate kind of flavor to complement some of the caramel and toffee. And I think like if I were to approach it, I would kind of work backwards and kind of try to accent the toffee and the caramel flavor.
Makes sense.
In comparison, I mean they're a complete contrast to one another.
Definitely good.
Yeah, the Irish red's cleaner in terms of like fermentation character, obviously, and is maybe a little lighter bodied and obviously more malt forward. But they're both the one thing that they do share is that they're both like really drinkable.
Exactly. Fantastic. Well, we've obviously tried 4 beers so far: U.S., Czech Republic, Belgium, and Ireland, and we're going to move on to Spain. So we're going to get those going, and we'll come right back. Fantastic.
I don't think I've ever had this.
Neither have I. It's from Spain. Interesting.
Okay, on to Spain. So the next one we're going to try, which is on the right-hand side. This is the darker colored one, right? This is the Scotch Ale, otherwise known as a wee heavy. Some people it goes back and forth, but this is a beer style from Scotland. It's called the Skull Splitter, and ABV is kind of getting up there with this one. This is 8.5 ABV. I think it has a beautiful color. Any comments on wee heavy or Scotch Ale before we try this darker one here?
I guess one way to look at it is it's sort of like a amplified version of an Irish red in a way. It's definitely malt forward and kind of leans into the more like caramel and toffee character. obviously with a higher ABV, so it's going to be just more malt across the board.
Wow, you just described my notes perfectly. Well done. Josh, any comments on the style here?
You know, I like we have is just like you said it. You know, I would think it'd be more of a multi front to start out with, a little lighter on the aromatics of hops in the.
Awesome. There's so many different styles. There's over 100 different styles, as we know, if you include lagers and ales. And sometimes I've heard this compared as sort of an English barley wine cousin or close to it. I mean, is that true? Any truth to that, or no? Was that way off?
I wouldn't say it's way off, but I would see there might be some correlation to that, but I wouldn't say 100% now.
Beautiful.
I think compared to an English barley wine, they're going to be using like Scottish malts, and English barley wine will often have a little bit of roasted barley to kind of aid in the color development, whereas like most Scottish beers don't really have roasted barley.
I mean, I could smell that caramel off of that. And as we've been tasting these, you probably notice if you rewind the video, all of us were probably smelling it first, which is traditional. So I usually tell my students, similar to wine, you're going to actually sight it first, look at it first, and then smell it. Then with wine, you would swirl it. You probably wouldn't swirl beer, and then you sip it and then savor it. So that's sort of the method here. That's what I would recommend, looking at the color first. These are identifiers, and one of the reasons where that helps, certainly with wine, is if making sure you have the right varietal or style, or similar with beer too. But the smell on this is very like caramel,
Get,
toasty.
get a little bit of heat, not much, but you get just a little bit of heat.
Yeah, you can tell that it's a higher ABV, definitely.
Yeah, definitely tastes a little boozy, kind of. That's what makes tasting beer so much fun, certainly with craft brewing and what these gentlemen make every day, is there's so much variety. There's something for everybody. Sometimes with wine, it's either, I don't want to dumb it down to red or white or sparkling, but there's lots of variety there too. But beer is where it's at as far as trying to find something that's for you, because there's all kinds of different, as you're learning from the Saison, from the lagers to this wee heavy.
I definitely feel like this kind of develops from the Irish red, but it moves into like with the higher ABV, you get a little bit more of like fig and like raisin character that maybe the Irish red didn't have.
Definitely got the raisin character you're talking about. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely get that now, as you say it. Definitely. And it's almost kind of sticky after it sort of sits in your palate a little bit. Well, the next one, the lighter colored, sort of more golden color, this is the one from Spain. This is a Hellsbach. It's a 1906 Reserva, defined as a pale, strong lager, and it's a very old world sort of recipe, is what they're talking about it as. And roasted malt, soft notes of caramel and coffee. So that's kind of fun to drink this next to the Scotch ale. Again, this is the beer from Spain, Hellsbach style.
Yeah, so a Hellesbach would be almost like an imperial version of a Helles lager. Typically, a Helles beer is kind of like bready and malty, but on the lower ABV end and not very hop forward. So this kind of takes that base beer and amplifies it. And it's with that extra malt, it starts to get a little bit like caramel and toffee, but it still has that nice kind of like bready, rich malt character without being overly like caramel or like darker fruits.
Yeah, and I think I made a mistake here. We probably should have tried the Helles first, because I totally agree with you. Yeah, it seems more rich with the Scotch ale and a little dampened with this one, the Helles. I was pronouncing it wrong.
It drinks very clean though. I mean, very clean.
I've been told that from chefs going back as working in kitchens and stuff, and I hear it from professionals like yourself too. If you're going to taste a few beers, if you taste the first one that's sort of powerful and strong and dare I say sort of concentrated and sweet, it sort of kills your palate, right? And so that's true, right? You want to sort of start off, if you're going to have several just to taste or in a flight, you want to start off with sort of the light, crispy.
The lightest, like least intense, and kind of work your way down for sure.
Right. Wouldn't want to start with an IPA because that would be your palate wrecker.
So it's sort of like eating dessert first and then doing your entree and then doing your salad last. Doesn't make any sense. That makes
I
sense.
don't know. I like desserts first sometimes.
Right.
Just in general too, like palate fatigue it's really surprising. Like having judged a lot of competitions, judging a flight of IPA, it's like you have 3 different IPAs in a row, and after that point, you can't really differentiate much. And that same thing applies with drinking, a variety of beers. It's not a bad idea to kind of like space them out, or like have water in between, or like a saltine or whatever.
Exactly. Makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I know some of you students might have a couple of these, 1 or 2 of these that you've purchased ahead of watching this video, and that's good advice. Maybe sort of drink a little water or eat something that sort of cleans your palate before you go on to the next one. Yeah. Fantastic.
Reset your senses a little bit.
There you go. I've even heard like having something like smelling coffee off to the side, or smelling, what was it? I think you were telling me this.
A
Where
lot
you
of
sort of rub
times,
your hands
a
together.
lot of times, just kind of take your wrist, rub them together, and just kind of reset a little bit, so
Yeah,
that way you can get your senses back.
Interesting. Any more comments on these 2 styles? And again, that was the Scotch Ale or the Wee Heavy from Scotland, and the Hellesbach from Spain.
Enjoyed them.
Fantastic. On to the next countries. Okay, on to England. There's so many different styles in England to choose from, but we're going with the Oatmeal Stout, the Sam Smith's Oat Stout from Samuel Smith Old Brewery, and it's certainly a beautiful one. This brewery was founded in 1758 and is still owned by the Smith family. It's actually a really good documentary on YouTube if you ever want to check it out. This beer goes way back. Often compared in the same wheelhouse as sort of like a Guinness, right? It looks beautiful. Obviously, it looks dark. We're on to a dark beer here, and it was recommended by my friends here to kind of move this down the list based on sort of well, it is a smooth tasting beer, I think, but just sort of the color and so we could experience this towards the end of the tasting session. So, what do you guys think about this one? Let's check it out. Anything about Sam Smith Brewery? Have you heard about anything? Or sure, I'm going to guess that you guys have probably tasted this beer before.
Yes,
This actual brand, yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
It's
Definitely.
pretty famous.
Yeah, Samuel Smith's is probably the UK brewery with the largest reach, I'd say. Maybe compared next to what's the other big one out there? They do ESB.
Oh, yeah, the ESP.
No, that's what you're talking about too. I'm trying to think about it.
It'll come to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely a brewery that if I ever go to England, I'd want to check out. And I've seen it on videos, and it's just an old process that they haven't changed, and it's they mash in copper tons, and they actually open. There's an open top fermenter, and it's like a slate fermenter, open top.
Yeah.
When they ferment it, I'm wondering how long they would do that for, or how does that work? That was just amazing to me.
It's just during like the primary fermentation.
Okay, so first few days.
And the rumors I heard, I don't know if they're true, is that it's one of the only living, breathing breweries. So with it being the open top fermentation, the actual inside of the building is alive, which gives it the yeast it needs. And apparently, if you watch it on slow mo and speed it up, you can actually watch the building contract because it's breathing.
Wow.
At least that's what they say.
Some of the pictures I've seen reminded me of walking into a distillery on a distillery tour, where you sort of see the open corn mash wood vessel, but this is it actually is a square-shaped slate vessel, and so yeah, this to me sort of, the more you research this, it sort of blows you away as a home brewer when we're always talking about oxygen being bad and during fermentation. You want to stop that after you sort of breathe the oxygen into the beer at the beginning, and then it's your enemy after that. But with this one, that's interesting. So it's, as you were saying, Jason, the first few days maybe.
Yeah, during primary fermentation, oxygen is okay because the
Yeah.
yeast will consume it and it won't oxidize beer. Part of the reason why they ferment in open top fermenters is specifically a lot of English yeast create really, really intense layers of foam on the top of the beer. And so by fermenting in an open container, you can punch the foam down, or you can actually scoop it off and add it to other beers to propagate. Whereas some English yeast, even in a closed fermenter like we have here, which is it's open to ambient air, but they're obviously not open. Most of that yeast just gets blown out of the tank anyways.
Right.
So using these open top fermenters, it allows you to keep things still in suspension.
Interesting. Fascinating. Fascinating. Color on this is just super rich. How would you compare it? Because everyone's probably had Guinness that's probably listening to this video that likes beer a little bit. Not all of my students watching have probably tried this particular brand, but how would you compare it to Guinness?
I think they're both different in their own characteristic and how they are. I mean, this is an oatmeal stout, so this definitely has a little body to it. This is going to be a little bit richer flavor in comparison to Guinness. Guinness is going to be smoother. It's a nitro beer, so it's going to be, I won't really say cleaner, but it just finishes nicer.
Yeah, the oats add body, and they also add almost like a oily slickness, which kind of benefits like a smooth mouthfeel. The ABV difference between this and Guinness is what, 2% or so?
Because Guinness is right around 3.5, 4.
Yeah,
This is 5.0 is what it's saying.
and Guinness finishes significantly drier. Like there's some residual sweetness here. There's a little bit of stickiness on your lips. Guinness is a really dry beer.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's what I'm getting. I was going to ask that because I'm getting that sort of lingering sweetness, which is nice. It's certainly a little more rich than like the Guinness. And I wasn't sure if I was influenced by the previous beer we just tried. But yeah, those notes are what I'm getting too. It's certainly definitely a rich beer. I mean, this would be one. Because people have paired Guinness with chocolate desserts, I think this would be even a better one to pair it with some desserts. Because
You can make your famous ice cream with this.
that's right, I could. Yeah, we do an ice cream and we reduce the beer, add it to a vanilla ice cream base, make the ice cream in a machine, and then just scoop it beer float with the same beer. So, yeah, this would be a fun one to do with, and also to marinate on maybe a roast or a
Say pot
yeah,
roast.
pot roast or
Yeah,
something.
stew.
Fantastic, a stew. Yeah, absolutely. Deglaze with this would be great.
Good. I'm like,
No, barely a hiss.
it was barely his.
Because I've opened these before, and it's like, oh yeah.
I was waiting for you to shoot someone's eye out.
Your eye.
That's good then.
This is a beauty. This is a beauty.
You can already smell it.
All right, no beer tasting would be complete without a Trappist beer, right? Right, gentlemen? We have just a fabulous one here. It is a Belgian triple from Trappist. It's a monastery. It's Abbey beer from Westmalle, which is in northern Belgium. This is just a fantastic beer. Any comments on Trappist beers, Abbey beers? I know there's a difference, and it has to be made by the monks, right?
To be
On
a Trappist
property,
beer.
to be a Trappist beer.
yes.
Yep. And I think there's not that many Trappist. There's not many monasteries that make those Trappist beers today, right? It seems like every year, every few years, you see sort of one disappear. So, any comments on what they're doing over there and with this style?
Basically, the style was made for a couple reasons. One was to basically a food source for the monks. A lot of it was a food source. The other part was done so they could actually make money to pay for their churches.
Right. Yep. And I know that this is actually this is a secondary fermented this is a bottle finish beer too. This specific one, not all triples are, but this one specifically is. And we have the single, the double, the triple, the quad. So there's different styles within those walls of the monastery. But this one is a good one. And so, as Jason mentioned, to be called a Trappist beer, you can make a beer in style of a Trappist beer and call it a triple, but you can't call it Trappist unless it's made in the monastery, right?
Correct.
Fantastic.
Interesting thing of Belgian beer in general, but Trappist beer as well, is they're all, for the most part, like pretty strong. Triple is definitely up there in the ABV range as well.
And somebody told me a while ago that the single which you don't really find many singles anywhere. They're usually made for the monks, but the single and the triple are sort of the light colored ones, and the double and the quad are the darker ones. So whether that helps you or not, but and this is coming in at 9.5. So this is boozy.
It's boozy, but the part that I really appreciate about it was compared to just the other one we had, where you could actually taste a little bit of the heat. You know, you don't get as much of the heat off of this. There's a little bit, but not as much for being a higher ABV beer.
Yeah.
Which is to me is nice.
I agree.
Keep going back to I keep mentioning anyways, the like drinkability, right? And beer, and if any sort of region would kind of define drinkability, it would probably be like Belgium, because although this is a 9% beer, it's very dry. They utilize a lot of candy sugar, which is like invert sugar, which is essentially like almost like a simple syrup that's got acid, like lemon, to bring the pH down. And using that in beer causes it to dry out a lot more. So they may be using the same amount of malt to make a 5% beer, but the addition of that sugar allows them to push it into such a high ABV range.
Wow.
And at the same time, keep the beers dry and drinkable.
Keep
Great
it dry.
stuff.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Yeah, and if we've talked about this in lectures, everybody, but if you ever want to just get some great, incredible, fun history on brewing, go to the country of Belgium and learn about whether it's physically going there or just watching videos and documentaries on breweries in the country of Belgium. The monasteries and these abbeys and Trappist monks in these monasteries, it started in France, right? And so at a certain point in time, they began to become persecuted and sort of pushed out, and they moved east, right? And many of them, if not most of them, moved to Belgium. Some of them moved to Canada across the Atlantic, but many of them, luckily, thank God, moved to Belgium and were welcomed there, and they're still there today. And it's pretty amazing with these. And I think there's most all of your Trappist breweries are in Belgium.
It's very good.
So on to the last beer that we're going to talk about today, and that is the Three Fontainen Ode Goose. So we're talking about a goose here. This is a spontaneously fermented beer. It uses the air that it's around and fermenting in, and I'm sure you guys have lots to talk about on this specific style. I know you guys have made both. I know Jason, we have a fooder at Calusa, and whether we do make spontaneously fermented beers in different breweries around the country, but to be actually called a lambic, it has to be made in Bejoitenland in Belgium. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Fantastic. So this is the final beer we'll be tasting. Any comments on what goes into just the trust and the level of expertise you have to make a spontaneously fermented beer with wild yeast and other bacteria?
So I guess like a little fun fact about like spontaneously fermented beer, like what does that mean necessarily? And the way it's done in Belgium is the hot wort, like after the boil, is pumped up to either a room or on top of the roof, where it's allowed to cool in a very shallow vat. And at the same time that it's cooling, the yeast and bacteria that are floating around the air land in the beer. And the next day, that wort is then pumped into barrels and allowed to ferment. And what it has picked up from the atmosphere, but also a little like thing that I kind of believe is the room that these are contained in, the barrels that they're going in, also house some of that same bacteria that they've been using for years. So that cumulative propagation is what causes these beers to ferment. And aside from that, the real critical component is blending to make these beers. They're pulling from wine barrels, dozens of them at a time, to make these blends, and that's as much of an art as like brewing it and the bacteria and yeast that go into it. A fun fact about spontaneous beer is it's very similar to kombucha. All the same microorganisms that go into making kombucha go into these spontaneous beer. The difference is kombucha is allowed to ferment in the presence of oxygen, and Acetobacter is one of the bacteria that, with alcohol and oxygen, it'll ferment into vinegar. And so that's why kombucha tastes a little bit vinegary and is typically low ABV, is because it's been allowed to consume the alcohol. So really, spontaneous beer is basically kombucha that's been kept separate from
Interesting.
oxygen.
And I'm definitely getting that, I'd say nice, pleasant vinegary flavor. I'm not sure if vinegar is the best way to describe it as, but it's that acid I like.
There's definitely like lactobacillus, Brettanomyces. They all contribute to a significant drop in pH as well. But the effect of these spontaneously fermented beers is they're probably the most yeast-driven beers of anything that we've tasted today. There's a lot of fruit. There's a lot of like barnyard and like hay and a mustiness. There's also like almost like a little sulfury, like it's kind of like matchstick, like a burnt match,
Yeah.
but in a pleasant way.
Right.
Definitely wine-like in a lot of ways.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and this is I just got to showcase this bottle here. So you could probably definitely find this at Total Wine and More, and you have the list of beers that you'll be able to source, everybody, and right on the bottle there it says, which I think is impressive. It's a lambic blend, and that's what a goose is, right? G-E-U-Z-E, goose. Not the same as some people confuse that with goza. It's different, but a goose is a blend of different lambics, and it says on the bottle here, from 5 different barrels originating from 8 different brews over 1, 2, and 3 year aging. So that's why these are so pricey and expensive. They're worth it because a lot of time goes into this. Inventory, shelf life, it just increases the price that you have to charge. So, and it's just a beautiful beer. Josh, comments on the.
I think you guys did a great job. It's great. And kind of like we were talking about the cool shift and inoculation, that is definitely going to be the biggest parts of this process. And I think it's, I got definitely a little bit of the funk off of there, but the clean funk, the very real nice one. So that you talked about a little bit like your vinegary and kombucha, blend it all together. I think it's great.
Yeah, that's the kombucha comparison, Jason, was great. I've never sort of compared that with the goose, and it's certainly true. I know, Josh, you do. Both of you guys are foodies. I've talked food with you briefly, but I know, Josh, you've done a lot of cooking and chefing in your day, and this is one of the things I like. One of the things I like about this beer and beers like this, whether it's a lambic or just sort of that acidic sort of. With a little bit of carbonation, is that it's almost sort of champagne-like, and it goes with so many different things food-wise. It's like with champagne, as a chef, you can pair that with anything. So any comments on pairing this with food?
Honestly, I would definitely do it with a bright salad. If I was looking for an appetizer, I would definitely do it with oysters. But I would definitely do the oysters a little different, not just raw, maybe something with them, not really a Rockefeller, but maybe something a little bit with like smoked salt a little bit, just a little bit on there. For a main dish, you know what, I'd go veal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I would say, beers that sort of have that champagne, I guess, description of it, a lot of even some wheat ales that are fruity and sort of have a good carb to them. They sort of have that champagne. They're liked by many people. Beers like that, I think, have a really good chance of going with many different dishes than some styles, which are just pegged at. For instance, IPAs is sort of always kind of geared towards rich grilled foods or steak or things like, or a burger.
Spicy.
But this beer is phenomenal.
That's good. It's really good.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I got to really thank both of you for taking time out today. You guys are busy. You guys are running businesses and creating new incredible beers for us to taste, and I really appreciate you both of you taking time out for this. But this is going to really benefit our students in the School of Hospitality. Thanks, Jason, for letting us hang out here in soon to be the new space of Calusa.
Soon, one day,
someday soon. And this is just a beautiful space. Hopefully someday you'll get to come down to Sarasota, or if you're in Sarasota, you're even closer. And I also want to thank, of course, Josh Wilson, who's sort of helped me start the program here at USF years ago, about almost 10 years ago. And Josh, you've always been a great friend and also just a great hotline on brewing, and you've always been there for us too. And Jason, again, Josh, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.